I hope everyone's still doing all right. Welcome. I'm Evan Anderson, CEO of INVNT IP. Can I get maybe a little bit of an interactive? Are we tired right now? Are we fired up? We still engaged? Okay. I'd like to introduce Robert Loeb. I shouldn't have done that. Now it's getting rowdy. I'd like to introduce Robert Loeb. He's a solutions architect at Micro Focus. He's a CISSP with over 20 years in experience, some in the private sector, 15 most recently with Micro Focus, Alaskan, T-Mobile, a number of top companies, and also was a guardsman in security as well. And I'd like to thank you for your service.
It's an honor to serve.
Yeah, it means the world to us. So I mean it when I say it. So Micro Focus has recently been rolled into HPE Software Solutions as well in a spun merger. Can you tell us what that means and what Micro Focus is today?
So Micro Focus is a long-standing British company. There was a merger between them and HPE to create the 7th largest pure-play software company in the world. And what's cool about that is by combining the two companies, they have greater reach on a global scale that provides end-to-end security solutions for the end customer. So we have not only the ability to protect data in the software development lifecycle, but also protect data where it exists, which is important, especially in today's world, where your endpoints are literally your cell phones. There is no more, this is my network and I'm going to protect it. My firewall is going to save me. It's not going to happen. Your data is everywhere. And sadly, that means you have to protect it everywhere. Unfortunately, Micro Focus has the ability to protect it.
Yeah, and maybe we could get a little bit deeper into that. We kind of had just discussed this backstage, but I like the idea that your endpoint is your cell phone, or rather the phrasing there, because I think it's easy in a BYOD era for people to forget just how large the attack surface has become. It's something that we touch on often at FiRe, I hope enough. But can you kind of maybe just do a better or a longer description of what the attack surfaces look like today to you?
So we have computers that host your data and you don't know where they are. They're in the cloud, they're in your laptops, they're in your home servers, they're in forgotten files on an email account you forgot you had. And while it may seem insignificant, that data is still there. And with the advent of technologies like big data, Hadoop, being able to pull all those data sets in and extract data from them using a script, that changes things. They now are able to build a profile for you. And our data is looked at a much more personal scale. We want to make sure that our social security numbers are protected, but people are more concerned about whether or not their email's been hacked. I don't want my personal data. I don't want my kids' photos out on the internet. I don't want some stranger knowing where I'm going to be at Tuesday at 2 o'clock in the afternoon if I'm going for a hair appointment or if I'm going to have a spa day. Yeah, I don't have spa days. Well, maybe I should, given the
with a job like yours,
a job like mine. But the reality is your data is everywhere, and you have to protect it everywhere. So the data-centric approach to protecting that data is the most important thing you can do. You have to make sure that it's encrypted. Unfortunately, that's resource-heavy traditionally. Fortunately, the company I work for has the creator of this technology called format-preserving encryption, which uses fewer resources but maintains the same level of security. And when you talk about attack surfaces, things like PCI, things like SOX, are you doing your customers a service? Are you doing your company a service? Are you doing due diligence from an audit perspective by saying, yes, your data is protected? And a lot of times companies can't justifiably say yes. The answer in reality is no, I'm not, because I don't know where all my data is. Well, your data is everywhere. It's in the cloud. It's in Azure. It's on AWS. It's on Google. It's on your phone. And it's in government computers, which are maintained a lot of times by individuals who are fresh out of another environment or fresh off of another contract, and they may know the environment, but they don't have the same level of concern for your data as you do. And I could point to the breach that happened with Office of Personnel Management. Okay, well, I wrote about this on my LinkedIn profile. By the way, feel free to connect with me. I'm not going to put it up. I don't have a slide. But if you take that data and you look at some of the other breaches that have happened recently, Equifax is one of them, and you combine that data, you now are able to complete a profile of individuals who work in our intel community. You're now able to get their credit habits. You're now able to identify who might be in debt. That's dangerous. And if the data that was in that division of Equifax was protected using something like format preserving encryption, who cares if they have it? Here, take all you want. You don't have the keys. You will never break that unless you have, I don't know, maybe 50 years in a supercomputer or an army of supercomputers. Then you might be able to break that. But by then I won't care because I'll be 90 and someplace, maybe in a spa, because I need a spa day. But it's important to note that this data is out there, and there are people who are right now correlating it. People think that the new currency out there is Bitcoin. The new currency isn't Bitcoin. The new currency is you. It's your information. If I am a bad actor in another part of the world, I don't care about the consequences. If I use your data to gain even a small foothold into another place where I can extract a couple of $1,000s and disappear, do I care that you have to pay for it? Do I care that it's on your credit report? No. I'm a bad actor. And this happens time and time again. So they're not interested in Bitcoin. They're interested in what they can take off of you in small chunks. Why? Because $13 a week is what these guys cost to live. That's their cost of living, where they live. And these same people, where they live, they're not known as hackers. They're not known as bad actors. They're known as heroes, geniuses, rock stars. And their ability to rake in that money and bring it into places like Côte d'Ivoire is something that causes the local politicians and the police to just simply look the other way. And my belief is when you have an environment like that, that's great that you have firewalls. That's great that you've got due diligence. That's great that you're doing code scanning, which we also do, to help protect those apps. But the most important thing is to protect the data. Because when you translate the data is you. It's everybody in this room. It's everybody in the United States, which is why other countries have followed suit. In some cases, they've jumped ahead with regulations like GDPR, where if your data is protected, if you have data, we want to make sure that you have a right to be forgotten. You have data that's, if you're dealing with a company in a third-party nation, and you go there and you're a European citizen, your data can't be tracked, and it must be forgotten.
Yeah, can you explain GDPR real quick in case anybody doesn't know what we're talking about?
So it's GDPR is a European requirement that states that you will be forgotten. You have a right to be forgotten. Your data cannot be, sorry? Yeah. Okay. Yes, and yes, you're right. And it is your data, and you do have the right to be controlled, to control your data. It's your data, hence the term, you have the right to do with it as you please. So you can choose to have it in a database for a longer period of time, or you could choose to be forgotten. And you almost sound like an expert on the subject.
Let's
I'm
keep
kidding,
the
like you're from
on-stage
Europe.
Stuff with the mics going, because otherwise we're gonna lose
no
it
worries
here.
there.
So.
But the long and short of it is, it's a European data protection requirement, and once it's in place and once it goes in place, any company that deals with a citizen or company that's in Europe, they have to comply with those European laws if they wish to continue to do business with them. And there is a lot of pressure to compete with that because we're a global company. Business is done on a global scale now. It's no longer isolated. You can't just do business in Utah because your customers are coming from everywhere. There are skiers who come here from England, from Norway, from France, from wherever. And as long as they're part of the EU, you have to comply with GDPR in order to serve those customers.
I think this touches on kind of some of the accountability issues as well that were just being discussed on the last panel. It was quite timely. In a similar way, the accountability that needs to be there in the cyber world and in the information security world is now, the infrastructure is now being built. And so I think that's really encouraging. I think it's really important. Mm-hmm. I think that what's most interesting about these new regulations are that they're actually punishing people. and taking revenue. So I think it was 4%
Yep.
of global revenue if
Yeah,
you screw up
and you
as a
have to.
company and you lose your user data.
Well, you have to.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, if we look at Equifax, and you touched on it for a minute, and maybe we could talk about that just as it's not exactly the elephant in the room, is it, right? It's being discussed all the time, but that kind of lack of accountability is clearly a major problem and can undermine the whatever cybersecurity solutions you have. So do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, well, it's really, you have to look at it from an end-to-end perspective. Your cybersecurity solutions have to not only start at your infrastructure, but they also have to end at where the data resides. Where's your endpoint? Your endpoint's everywhere. So you've got to protect that. You've got to protect how you process it. You've got to protect the environment which you collect it in. You've got to protect the code of the apps which collect that data. You literally have to do the full stack protection of that data. And when it comes to something like Equifax, there are a number of concerns a person can have that have already been spelled out by people like Brian Krebs. And he pointed out that one of the passwords on the site was admin. All right, well, if that's not negligence, I don't know what is.
Right.
Yeah, that makes me feel real secure. Now, and I know I'm out there.
Yeah.
And it's scary to think that Equifax didn't have a response to this. So not only was their disaster response inadequate, but their security for implementing solutions was inadequate. And I would question, what kind of protection did they have in place to protect me?
Right.
To protect all of you? Because everybody in here, I'm sure, has a credit card or they've got a mortgage. What have they done to protect you? Is your data protected in their environment? Well,
and are they accountable, right?
Yeah, are they accountable?
So right now they're not, clearly, I think.
Yeah, and that's where that 4% comes in. Mm-hmm. And it goes beyond that 4%. I mean, you have brand damage, you have reputation damage. I mean, how many multi-billion-dollar losses are due to brand damage? Target, for example, lost 33% of its shareholder value within 6 months of the breach that they had it. And when they further revealed that they had a practice of not following the recommendations of the security vendor, it went even further and people were fired. How much further is this going to go before the fines remain at 4%?
Yeah.
And I would even speculate they're going to get higher.
Yeah. I think I would hope to see that. Yeah. It's very important, I think, to everyone. We'd like to take some questions. If you have any questions, feel free to go up to the mic. If not, we'll just keep rolling. We only have a couple minutes, so I think one thing that would be good to touch on would be the NIST framework. I think is worth talking about. You guys are NIST certified. Can you kind of explain how that works to everyone? Maybe a show of hands. Who knows what NIST is? Okay, so about half the room. Yeah. Do you want to go into that briefly and then maybe
Sure. Well,
texture it for?
So NIST is a standard body, and what they do is they create standards that are published, and you're supposed to meet the standards guidelines. So anything that you build upon it, and literally all security regulations and anytime you have to comply with a security policy or et cetera, you have to go back and say, yes, we are NIST compliant. Yes, we meet the NIST standards at a minimum. And people think, oh, well, we meet NIST. That NIST is great, but you need to go over and above NIST.
Right.
And when your technology doesn't, you're doing yourself a disservice. But NIST is a great standard. Unfortunately, there's a lot of companies.
The beginnings of the accountability.
Right.
Yeah.
A lot of companies aren't NIST certified. Sir.
So we have a question.
This is Ty Carlson. When reading the GDPR, I was a little bit surprised by the claim of having to delete content of EU citizens doing something in the United States. It seemed like a tremendous overreach and a taxation implemented by the EU. And if this really comes to pass and it becomes a big deal, I could see the U.S. coming back and saying, a bit of a retaliatory type action of, you're imposing a tremendous cost on our business with regard to all of our infrastructure and all of our data management, basically at your whim, and with no real feedback or anything like that. So it's kind of the taxation without representation game all over again. Mm-hmm. And I'm concerned it's an overreach, and I'm interested in comments you might have regarding that.
It is probably the most accurate statement about GDPR. That is a massive overreach into the United States' sovereign identity.
I agree.
You can't impose a rule on another country and say, you must follow this. And sadly, a perfect example of this PCI and SOX, a lot of European companies are forced to follow PCI and SOX, and a lot of times they just follow lip service. And there is questionable actions on part of U.S. companies which might say, you know what, we're going to pay it lip service. Yeah, sure, we delete it. You know, we're Ashley Madison, for example. We totally deleted your data. No, they didn't.
Yeah, they just sold to somebody else. You know.
Yeah,
Thank you.
exactly. I don't know about that account either, and I've never been on Ashley Madison.
All right, on that note.
But yes, it's a massive overreach. But it's the price of doing business globally. And the only way that you're going to be able to address that is to either A, 100% comply with GDPR, or take measures to implement compensating controls to ensure that that data is protected wherever it sits. Sir?
Do you personally feel that all your data is secure? Your credit cards, your smartphone, your computer, your email, your credit reports, everything? And if not, what do you think is insecure?
Do I feel my data is secure? The answer is no. Where do I feel it's secure? It's not. If you have Facebook, if you have LinkedIn, you're out there. That's your social profile. If you have a home address, you go on Zillow, you go on Redfin, people can see the inside of your existing home. They can correlate that information. They can now go to Equifax and say, okay, well, this person's home address is at this point. I now have their correlating information on LinkedIn, so they worked at the following companies. And then I can look at their social profile and say, oh yeah, they went on vacation X number of times a year, so their probable income is X. And all that information is out there. Unfortunately, our current system of protection and compliance requirements only says we want to cover your PAN data, your credit card data. We want you to protect the social security number. For cell phone companies, we want you to make sure that you're protecting CP&I data. And even if you have all of those protected, at some point someone's going to have a little bit of the information from each of these places and we'll have a complete picture. The only thing you could do to protect it is to just exercise personal due diligence, to know where your data sits, to keep a log, sadly, like in an Excel spreadsheet, of where you went, where you're going. There are credit monitoring services. I am a subscriber, not on Equifax, obviously. But I do pay for that service, and I do get the alerts. And every once in a while, I do go over my bank statements. And this is sadly the cost of being a global person, a citizen of the world. Because a person in South America who is from a questionable background, or a person in the Middle East, likewise, or even in Eastern Europe, they don't care. They only care about that little bit that they can take from you right now.
All right, and that's time. Thank you very much, Rob.
Hey.
Pleasure.
And thank you.